good evening. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the second virtual offering of the Washington for Law Society. I'm Giuliana Canet, the president of the Washington for Law Society, which was founded in 1952 to promote knowledge and understanding of the international legal matters, comparative legal issue, and foreign law. This evening we host the second of our new series, Conversation and Coffee or Cocktail, with members of the Washington for Law Society board. Aisha Gringel, recent graduate from WFLS, will interview Melissa Jones, Senior Operation Officer in Fragility Conflict and Violence Group at the World Bank Group. I hope you have, depending on your time zone, your coffee, your cocktail, and sit back, relax. Given the number of participants, you would be muted during the webinar, but able to communicate with us via the Q&A section. Please send questions for Melissa using the Q&A as soon as now, whenever you feel like, and we'll get to your question toward the end of the presentation. The session will be recorded and hopefully we will put it as well on the website. Welcome, Aisha. The floor is yours. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you, Giuliana. Thank you, Giuliana. Also welcome from my end. I'm Aisha Gringel, a recent graduate of GW Law. I have the pleasure of interviewing Melissa today. And I see our number of participants is rising, which is very great and pleasant. And I would say let's get right into it with the first question. I prepared a few questions for Melissa, but feel free to use the Q&A function to deliver questions that you may have for her as well. So Melissa, thank you for agreeing to be our second guest on our new series.
Great, well, thank you very much. This is fantastic. And so I just, sorry to interrupt, but I do want to thank Giuliana for her leadership of the Washington Foreign Law Society. I think as a group, we put on fantastic events, and so I'm very much looking forward to the rest of the series and to see the others that come in the future, and just appreciate all of the effort that you go through to put these on. And I also want to congratulate you, Aisha, on graduating. I know you've been practicing law for a while, but this LLM is a huge accomplishment. So well done in pretty challenging times this final semester.
Thank you very much, Melissa. So since our audience will be mixed with recent graduates, students, and professionals, I've prepared a broad range of questions so we can cover all areas of expertise. And my first question to you would be, why did you choose the legal profession? And if you maybe could describe a little bit how you became a lawyer and speak about your path.
No, thanks. I have always been interested in the rules that societies set to govern themselves. And so I studied public policy in undergraduate. And I heard a great definition of public policy the other day. And this was actually from the graduation speaker of the school where I went. And she called public policy the professional manifestation of giving a damn. And so I've always kind of given a damn about how government is functioning, what rules we're putting in place, how strong our institutions are. And in particular, just going back on the speaker's comments, she said it was the act of extending the care that we have for those around us to all of society. And I would say that through my work in international development, it's not only those around us to all of society, but to all of the world. And so going to law school was a natural, getting a law degree was a natural terminal degree. Because I was interested in the policy world, and it was the best one to prepare me for what I expected to be a career in government service here domestically.
Great, great. So let's talk a little bit about your current position at the World Bank. If you want to elaborate what you're currently doing there, and how did you get to working in that specific division that you are in now?
Okay. I'm currently a senior operations officer in the Fragility, Conflict, and Violence group at the World Bank. I work specifically on forced displacement, so that's refugee populations, internally displaced populations, but more than anything on protecting the very vulnerable groups of refugees that are housed in many host countries that are generally developing countries. This is a new role for me. I just joined this group in January, and in general, it's a relatively new field for me. But when I trace my work back, I have to go back to actually when I first started volunteering in high school with my church youth group on the border towns of Texas and Mexico. And so I went every summer with my church. We worked on the Mexican side of the border. And I just found it really rewarding, both incredibly interesting work, fantastic culture, amazing food. If anybody's ever been to the border region of US-Mexico, it's incredible across all the way from Tijuana to Corpus Christi. It's just amazing, amazing food. But there's also just a really rich culture and a blending of cultures. And so after studying public policy in undergraduate school, I went into the Peace Corps. And I saw that, again, still as very separate from what I thought was going to be my policy and my domestic policy work. I thought I would do a couple of years of international service. Purely because I found it really rewarding, and I was assigned to Honduras. So when I was in Honduras, I met a lawyer with USAID who was running a legal reform project with the Honduran government in Tegucigalpa. And it was the first time that I saw that you could combine a legal career with international development, and it would be an opportunity for me to combine my two passions, one for policy work, but the other for international, in my mind is still international exploration, but it's very much development work. And having that opportunity to work with other cultures in different countries. So I finished Peace Corps. I went to law school, always with the mind that I would seek to join the World Bank, USAID, any of the international NGOs that work in this field. Some people may be surprised to hear that immediately after law school, I very explicitly decided to join a large international law firm because the obvious view to pay down debts, which is helpful, but I also knew that most international development is driven by the private sector, and in many ways by large private firms, multinational firms that are investing in what are now the World Bank's client countries. And so I joined Cleary, Gottlieb, Steen, and Hamilton. I'm a very proud alumna. I very much loved and appreciated my time there, and worked in cross-border M&A and securities transactions, in banking regulations, so that I could get to know what was driving these companies' decisions, how they operated, how they made their decisions of whether to invest in places or not. After a few years, Cleary rightly asked me to specialize. There wasn't an international development field in Cleary Gottlieb. And so I started looking for another job, and was lucky to find a role within the World Bank. So within the World Bank, I've gone back and forth between research and operations. I love both. But what got me to my current role was very much my volunteer work. I had actually left on an external assignment, was on my way coming back to the World Bank. And when the current administration started to separate children from their parents or from their caregivers at the US-Mexico border, I was outraged, as so many people were. But I also recognized that I had the time, I was a Spanish-speaking American lawyer. The Spanish I speak is actually Central American rural Spanish, so it was the Spanish of the people that in general were coming up through the border. And I thought I might be able to help those people. And so I started volunteering at the border, both with an organization here in Washington and at different places along the US-Mexico border, going down and sitting with the asylum seekers and helping them prepare for their credible fear interview, prepare their applications for asylum, and then ultimately prepare for their case in court, in immigration court. And so I found my passion for this work with refugee populations, with asylum seekers, with generally the people who are escaping terrible conditions and trying to create a better lives for them, for themselves, and wanted to pursue that full time. So I'm thrilled to have that opportunity at the bank now, to have recently joined the team that works with forcibly displaced populations and be able to pursue that not only as a volunteer. Until COVID, I'm still going to the border to volunteer, but also through my professional work.
Wow, that's very impressive, and it's great that you do the work that you do. It's necessary that you do it, and that you actually take the time to volunteer and use your professional knowledge is really remarkable and very impressive. So kind of going back to that, you've elaborated on the different places in your career that you've found yourself, being in working for a big law firm, and then going more into the down the international development route. Throughout all those stops in your career, you have developed important skills. Would you be able to share what skills you have developed and what skills you think are most important to be able to do the work that you do now?
Okay, sure, thank you, and I'll definitely address that, but I also want to respond to your comments. I find it really rewarding. So I think it's also just a general call for everyone to see what they care about and then work towards that. You will always find work. I'm particularly moved by the upheaval that we're seeing now, which is just the manifestations in the street of the frustrations that people have been living more privately for the last decades and hundreds of years in this country. And so we all have an opportunity to and an obligation to work towards improving these conditions, but it's also very rewarding personally. So that's just a more general call out to everybody to go ahead and step into the arena and help in the ways that they can the most, and volunteer or work or however, but it's extraordinarily rewarding to do so. For the skills, something that I'm getting better at, I am still working on it very much. For me, I think it's incredibly important to understand the goals of the clients. And that takes listening, and really listening to not only what they're saying, but what they're not saying, to who is saying it, and what how messages might change over time. And so that has been something that I have worked on a lot. I think it matters within our own teams. I think it matters within our own families. But certainly as a professional, really understanding the goals of our clients and then working with them and bringing whatever I can to the table with them to help them solve the problems that they've identified as top priority for them is really a crucial skill that I hope is getting better for me, and I'll continue to work on that. Similarly, a skill that's really important in my field is building coalitions. because we tend to work in complex areas, both geographically, politically, and also fields in which there's not a simple solution or very elegant, tidy answer to the issues that we're trying to address. And so even though the World Bank is well-resourced and relatively big, we can't and we shouldn't be the only solution or the only player that's working in a particular area. And so building coalitions across the other service providers in the areas, the other organizations that are working in the areas is critical to be able to align our efforts in a way that's synergistic and can yield the most results. So those two areas are areas that I put a lot of time into. Listening and then also building those coalitions. And I think they're very important in my field.
Yeah, certainly. So since we have, as I said in the beginning, we have recent graduates, we have students, but we also have professionals in the audience that maybe are looking for a new role, or looking to transitioning into a new role. Since you have done that a few times in the past, and you've worked in the most different fields, maybe you have some advice for those professionals seeking a new challenge.
Yeah. Biggest advice is just do it. I mean, it's a lot of work, but it's really, really good to transition to new areas. You learn so much. I get more energy through these changes, and it really enriches life. You're exposed to a broader range of ideas, of perspectives, of opportunities, and so I think if people are hesitating, there's very good reason to hesitate. It's a little scary. I recognize the privileged position I'm in to be able to make some changes I've made. But I think that it's very rewarding to get these different perspectives. The advice that I would give is that, I guess, twofold. To the extent you have it, you're able to know what you're moving towards so that you can describe it very specifically for others who either may be in the position to open up some opportunities for you, or otherwise would be able to give you some advice or make introductions, etc. And so to the extent that you can understand not only the field that you're looking for, but the type of organization, the culture of the organization, the size of the organization, those things matter a lot on whether you're successful there, but they also matter on how well others can help you make that transition. And then the second bit of advice would be to be patient. And work hard at it. It just takes a lot of effort. It's frustrating in that sense. It takes time to build those connections, to make the links, and then go through the process of making that transition. But it definitely is possible, and it's very rewarding once you get there.
Great. So it's certainly important to have the courage to explore possible options in the future. So I think this is a question that a lot of females hear, but I want to reiterate that we at the Washington Foreign Law Society also ask our male guests about this. But I just wanted to talk about work-life balance. Your work certainly requires a lot of travel, which makes it very interesting as well. But as you mentioned earlier, you have a family, you're a mother. How do you balance that, having to travel a lot and also being in a field that requires a lot of interactions outside of your home base, but having a family at the same time?
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate that you started out by saying this affects everybody. And so there's certainly no monopoly on care. That's only for women. Anne-Marie Slaughter has some really good work on this that I'm sure most people are aware of. But yes, everybody has a range of interests, a range of obligations to family, to society, and just in general doesn't want to work all the time. I think there's also there's a personal aspect for it as well. I have always been very structured and put boundaries. I leave the office at 5:15, which is quite early. I usually don't get there before 9. That is when I used to go to the office. So it's become more fluid here in COVID times. But I would just have to be very efficient when I was there because I like my kids. I wanted to be with my kids. And it's important that they be supported in their growth and their own development, and they know that I like them and want to be with them as much as I do. So those are the boundaries that I put when I'm in town, and I also have to recognize I have a fully engaged husband who also is just as an equal co-parent with me. I still have a nanny, and my son's 13 years old, so I'm a full fan of lots of support as well, to the extent that that's possible. Traveling's a treat for me. Traveling's easy. I have to take care of myself. There's no one else's lunch. There's no one else's homework or somebody to get to bed on time or anything like that. So traveling for me is very simple. And my husband travels as well, quite a bit for his work. And so for me, it's actually the day-to-day in Washington that's harder to manage than when I'm out. And when my husband travels, I actually find that I have some really nice time with our boys that's possible when he's not here. And then when I travel, he says the same thing. So that's the traveling for me is less of an issue than normal life when I'm home.
Okay. I just wanted to note that the session will be recorded for the participants that just joined us. I see that we have a few questions from the audience, and I would say let's just jump right into it. I'll read out the question that we have. So this one says, both as to COVID-19 and also the more recent developments of the last week, when considered together, may tend to undermine the very presumptions on which the Bretton Woods institutions have been founded. In what ways do you see it's hard to read. In what ways do you see these presuppositions changing, and do you share the uncertainty which we all seem to be experiencing globally, internationally, transnationally, nationally, and locally?
Okay. Great. Well, there's a lot there, and so maybe that's a side conversation. I'm not quite sure if you're thinking about the United States leadership or if you're thinking more about the goal of the organizations. It's easier for me to speak honestly to the goal of the organizations because specifically in the COVID response, I've been quite proud of the World Bank Group's rapid mobilization of resources to support our client governments in addressing not only the health emergency that comes with COVID, but also the economic devastation that's brought through some of the necessary public health measures that then shut down so much of economic activities. And so the World Bank has already moved, I'm going to get my numbers wrong, they're planning to move $160 billion over the next 15 months. I don't know how much has moved to date, but to free up funds to support our client governments in their COVID response. So certainly for COVID, I think the bank is moving in high gear to help countries prepare and support their populations in the health emergency as well as the economic concerns. And I've been personally involved in helping to make sure that those are extended to some of the most vulnerable populations, including refugees and other displaced persons who can be sometimes left out of national response plans.
Okay, thank you very much. We have another question that came in. This one is about, it says, could you talk more specifically about what impact the World Bank is having with displaced group and what your role is in that work? What is or was a typical day? Could you talk about what the World Bank Group's Global Indicators Group does and what's your role with that? So it's rather 2 in 1. So talking about your displaced group work and about the Global Indicators Group.
Sure. So for the forced displaced group, the World Bank has many operations that seek to improve the conditions within host communities and refugee populations. And so these take a range of different forms, but they might be in social protection, they might be in environmental protection, jobs and economic opportunities, health programs are quite common, and a few in education as well. And so our goal is to help meet the obligations and the promises under our IDA funding to support our client governments in providing these services to reach the refugee populations, but also those communities that have been affected by the inflows of refugees. And so my day-to-day work right now is we're preparing for the launch of IDA 19. This is getting a bit into the weeds, but IDA is our source of funding for many of these activities. And so I am specifically making sure the rules are clear, the teams can tap into the funds, and that we have a pipeline of projects that meet the clear needs of these groups. So I currently am writing briefs, reaching out to team leads, thinking about how do we operate when we can't travel, and other just trying to get the pipeline of funds going to meet the needs of these groups. On the Global Indicators Group, that is a research division within development and economics. They produce a range of indicators. So these are measures of countries' regulations in a variety of different areas. And so the ones I'm most familiar with, I haven't been there for a couple of years, so I may be outdated in my information. But those that I'm most familiar with look at the ways in which a country's laws and regulations affect individuals' opportunities to start a business, to get property, to file a lawsuit, to import and export goods. And some that were particularly of interest to me in my latter years there looked at the ways in which laws can both explicitly and then through the practice undermine women's economic opportunities. So it's very much a link of law and policy and how it played out in our countries, in our client countries.
Great. So I see the questions are coming in, which is great. We asked to bring your own questions, so feel free to drop them in the Q&A section. The next question we have is, what are some of the new challenges with engaging private sector stakeholders in the age of COVID and other market disruptions? I see IMF and the World Bank stepped up to providing relief to emerging markets, but it doesn't seem that private investors have demonstrated similar momentum.
Great, and on that part, I think everyone is facing this enormous shock, which is still relatively new, even if you go back to the time that China was locking down. It's only been 6 months, I guess. And so everybody that I can see, this is just my observations, from the private sector side, is just looking to make sure they're liquid. And that's what the IFC has been doing, as far as I can tell, is just pumping out funds to make sure we avoid bankruptcies at a huge extent, that if people are laying off their workers, that they get them back on board as quickly as possible. So I would not expect to see major lines of new investments. It's a very defensive position that I've been observing. Again, this is not my role right now, so it's just my own personal observations, that firms are very conservative, are very defensive, and are trying to avoid losses rather than taking new investments that much. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So we also received some questions beforehand via email. I'm just gonna take one of them. Since you've received a few questions around COVID, obviously is still very present here in the US and also worldwide. And you mentioned earlier that travel is an essential part of your work and necessary for your work. So one of the participants asked, how has the current pandemic impacted your work?
Yeah, as you just mentioned, I really miss traveling. And I don't expect to travel for another year, to be honest. I will be happy if I can go earlier, but I'm not expecting to leave Washington unless it's for personal driving somewhere. I'm not expecting to leave for another year. I really, really think this is going, the infections rate are going to continue to spike. I think we won't have reliable treatments or vaccines, certainly not for quite a long time. And so my thinking and my planning is around how I can continue to do a good job without a part of my work that was always considered to be crucial and central to my ability to understand the needs of clients and shape solutions to it. So like the rest of us, we're becoming experts at Zoom, WebEx, all of the other platforms, Microsoft Teams. It's not the same, but we're doing our best, and I've found the transition to be, all things considered, relatively seamless, in the sense that I already was paperless. I was already able to and used to working at different hours and on different technologies, and so that has just continued on in this space. But the health concerns will continue for a while. The economic fallout is going to be massive for a very long time, and we will continue to see, I expect, and I'm quite worried about, the unrest that we're seeing here in the United States, but throughout also our client countries. I hope we don't see it, but we're also understanding that these types of pressures can spark already underlying conflicts to be more active.
Okay, we have one more question that came in. Could you talk about the bank's relationship with different UN agencies, especially with the UNHCR, in terms of working for IDA 18 regional sub-window for refugees and host communities?
Sure. The bank and UNHCR have a very nice partnership. I'm new to it. I understand it's been going back quite a long time. But they have very complementary mandates, and also I think the potential for significant additional work together to support the refugee populations in the countries in which we're active. And so that's an organization that I think very highly of. It's one that the bank has a strong established relationship with, and where I think we can do a lot more work together in the future.
So I think we have time for one more last question. So I encourage the audience, if you have any question you wanted to ask Melissa, this is your chance. So I
also want to ask the audience, please stay tuned for other opportunity, but mostly if you have a specific interest, we are able to accommodate. Our board is so broad in their experience that we can tap on it. So especially in this time where everything is virtual, we can reach out even to people abroad. So if you have a specific interest, we will be very happy to look into that.
Thank you, Juliana. So I have one more last question for you, Melissa. And this was sent in by a student. And the question is, what advice would you give young graduates interested in working in your field?
I would really encourage everyone, not only the young students, but everyone to volunteer. To start working in a field that you are passionate about, and if you're not able to find a paid position, just get in there and offer your time and your skills and your energy and your talents to a group that resonates with you. I say that not only in the field of international development, but also very much responding to the recent events here in Washington, but also across the United States. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done by all of us to improve opportunities for all of our society. And so I encourage you to join some group, whoever, whatever one speaks to you, and volunteer. For professional development, it's an extraordinary way to demonstrate your dedication to a particular area. And it's also an excellent way to build the technical expertise that I think is also highly valued, both in the private sector legal field, but also international development. People are looking for other colleagues who can bring an expertise to the table. You can change it over your career. You don't have to pick one for the entire career, but do be able to identify your technical field, because I think that's a really key to demonstrating what you can bring to the table beyond all of the other willingness to work and being organized and all of the rest that's needed. So please volunteer. Get out there, be active in a COVID responsible way. But our country needs you right now, and the broader world does as well. So I will applaud you when you do.
Thank you. I see that we have a rather long question. I think we're unfortunately out of time, but I would use the opportunity and just send you the question off topic of the Zoom webinar, so our participant will surely get an answer. I just wanted to thank you for taking the time today, for joining us here, sharing your experience with professionals, with recent graduates like myself, and with students, for your valuable words. And I look forward to our next series. As Juliana, our president, said, you're welcome to send in suggestions if you want us to touch on a certain topic. Our board is very, very broad and has a lot of expertise in different areas, and we welcome your suggestions and look forward to seeing you for our next session. Melissa, as our guest and our host, some final words from your end, please.
No, not at all. Thank you. This was a great pleasure. I appreciate everyone joining, and I look forward to the ones to come. So please, everyone, be safe. Get out there, do your part, and I look forward to learning from the future of the series of Washington Foreign Law Society. Thanks to you, Aisha, for your excellent work, and to Juliana for your leadership.
Thank you, Melissa. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Bye.